Thank you. So Michigan's municipal solid waste in 2018, which is the last year we have data for that's been compiled, we produced almost 9 million tons of municipal solid waste. As you can see in the pie chart, about 38% of that was compostable or organics, which is food waste and yard waste. 26% plus 20% were some form of recyclables. And then 16% was actually trash. So there's a lot of potential here to change what we do with our waste. When we get down to that municipal solid waste, we can see that 53% of that is commercial and about 47% of that is residential. When we talk about the commercial and institutional waste, three main buckets that it comes from: retail, trade. So this is the goods and services that we as consumers buy in the store. Accommodation and food services. This is like when we go out to eat or we go to a hotel. And then transport and warehousing. This is some of the stuff when our goods and services get transported. And this information is from Next Cycle. So solid waste. In solid waste, we have what's called a solid waste management resource plan. It's a strategic plan for our operational waste management in the city. This is important. It tells how we're going to meet the needs of the residents. It includes year-round compost, curbside pickup of textiles and electronics, and a plan to deal with construction and demolition debris. This is debris of when you're building a house or remodeling a building. 820, so the carbon neutrality plan has strategy 5. This has changed the way we use, reuse, and dispose of materials. And these are the targets within that strategy. You can see a lot of them overlap with the solid waste plan, but there's a big one in here called Move Toward a Circular Economy. So that's what we're talking about today. 820 plan has 3 keys to success. I imagine this was discussed a little earlier. Equity must be sustainable, and it must be transformative. This last one is extremely important with the circular economy. We really need to transform the whole system of how we do things. And we need to do it in a more equitable and sustainable manner. So what is the circular economy? The more common term you'll hear is zero waste. And what that simply means is to send nothing to a landfill. But what it means more in a more complex, nuanced definition is that we need to transform the system, and we want to perpetually reuse materials. So if you think of a natural system, an ecosystem, there's no such thing as waste. So that's where the circular economy is modeled on. You'll also hear this term sustainable materials management. This is what the EPA talks about. It's very similar to the circular economy, but it takes in other impacts as well, such as production, transportation, greenhouse gases, and other environmental impacts. This is a nice visual. On the left here is the linear economy. We take things from the natural environment, we make something, and then we dispose of it. And we do this with fossil fuels, so finite resources. The circular economy, you got this circle here, we reuse, we remake, we refurbish, and we do it with renewable resources. When we talk about the circular economy, we can talk about the use of resources. So this is a pyramid kind of describing what the best use of resources is. At the bottom, we have, the best use of a resource at the top is we remove the need for this resource. So I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you're doing the strawless campaign. This was really big. If you don't use straws, then you have removed the need for straws. That's the strawless campaign. Reducing, this is needing less of something. So I'm going to give a really elementary example, but if you're printing things and you're printing it on both sides of the page, you're reducing your need for paper. Or if you then take that printed paper and you use it as scrap paper after that, you're also reducing your need for paper. Resource, this is changing the materials or sources. So if you think about a really big one here is electricity. So changing the source of our electricity from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And as we go down the pyramid of the ways to use resources, we then get to reuse. So this is reintroducing something to the same flow. So this might be when you donate your clothing, somebody else is using it as clothing, then we are reusing it. And then we get down to recycle. So this is where we use materials in a different flow. So we may take all those plastic bottles and we may turn them into a bench, or we take those plastic bags and turn them into treks or decks. And then we get down to recover. This is capturing some value. This is where compost is, although I think there's a good argument for moving compost up this hierarchy, but we can get into that later if you want. And then we get down to return. This is probably something like a landfill. And the biggest key here is redesign. We need to think about this at the beginning. When we design goods, we need to think about how do we design with the next phase of that good in mind, and the next phase, and the next phase, and how do we retain that item's value. So what are some of the benefits of this sustainable materials management and the circular economy? You got better utilization of resources, and this is more equitable. If we don't have to go and mine new resources, we have increased equity. Creation of less greenhouse gases, also an equity issue. New job creation, and a lot of economic opportunities. I think I've heard a lot of different numbers, but there's estimates that the circular economy is worth something like $6 trillion. So there's huge potential. So some terms you'll hear with circular economy: refurbish. That's what was done to these chairs. My son found these chairs on the side of the road and he brought them home, and I paid him to take all these slats off, sand them, and then to stain them. So he refurbished them for me. And he had a small job at the same time. So you can see if you were to multiply and scale that up, there's potential for other jobs. Remanufacture, this is something very similar to refurbish, but you think about it more in like an industrial setting. Repair, we all repair things, I hope. Share, the idea with sharing is when you think about how long you utilize a resource, it's not getting its usefulness maximized. So if you think about if you have a car, how often you drive your car a day. Let's say you drive your car 1 hour a day. The other 23 hours of the day, the car is just sitting there. Now, if you think of something like a hand drill, you have a hand drill. Let's say you use that hand drill 10 hours out of the year. Then that resource is just sitting there the rest of the time. So the idea with sharing is that you share these resources between people, maybe in a tool library, and then they get their value is maximized. Leasing, this is when you borrow something from a company, kind of, and then at the end of that life or your usage of it, the company takes it back, and then they're responsible for responsibly managing those materials. And maintaining is really important. If you have a car, I think you probably get an oil change. That's to make it last longer. Your refrigerants, they have coils on them that allow them to cool. If you clean those off, if you get the dust off of them about twice a year, your fridge and your freezer will last longer. So maintaining is an important concept. So some tools for going sustainable materials management or circular: repair shops, reuse stores, consignment shops. This is where you get some money back for selling your used goods. Libraries, repair cafes. Repair cafes are pretty cool. This is a community-led initiative where people offer their services to repair things. So all these people who want to repair will set up and they'll advertise and say, if you have this kind of thing or this kind of thing, please come and we'll repair it for you. But you have to stay there while it's getting repaired so that you build a community with the people you're talking with. The Fix-It Clinic, this is, I think, a global phenomenon. They have a website. It's very similar to a repair cafe, except when you go to these, they teach you how to fix your thing yourself. So they might show you how to fix your phone. And I know they were doing some online stuff during the pandemic as well. Some online tools, things like Nextdoor, Buy Nothing groups. If you don't know what Buy Nothing groups are, these are hyper-local groups where the idea is you don't have to buy anything. So if you need something, you go to this group and say, I am looking for a baby stroller or whatever it is. And then if somebody has one, they'll supply it. Or you can give things up in the same way. Facebook Marketplace is, I think, a place where you buy and sell. Same thing with eBay and Craigslist. So the city is going circular in some degrees, moving in that direction. So one example of that is in parks, we just leave the grass clippings on the ground. So this is an example of we removed that waste. There's no longer that waste. Parks shares equipment between golf courses. So this is an idea of reducing because they're sharing. Parks also takes the street grindings that are when the city resurfaces the road and there's that top layer of asphalt, Parks will take it and they will put it along their cart paths. So this is an example of resource. They don't have to get something new. And then also that keeps that material out of the landfill. The city has a surplus supply closet. So before you purchase anything, you can go to the supply closet and see if there's something there that you need. And then recycled, we have citywide curbside recycling. We have a drop-off station for things that are not accepted curbside. And Recycle Ann Arbor is working to bring a MRF materials recovery facility to the city for our region. And then we also have citywide residential composting. So what are some things that we can do to expand the circular economy / sustainable materials management? Well, it focuses around legislation, policy, and collaboration. So some things that your organization might want to lobby for or move toward is extended producer responsibility laws. This is when the manufacturer makes something, but the manufacturer is responsible for its disposal at end of life. Right to repair laws. So if you have a really nice TV, a flat screen TV, or maybe even an iPhone, you might not be able to open it. That's because Google, there are no right to repair laws. They don't have to make it accessible for you to repair it, and they also don't have to provide you with a repair manual. So right to repair laws would correct some of these things. Recycled content performance standards. This is just saying in all new bottles, there needs to be 25% recycled content, things like that to create a demand. Bans and taxes on single-use items. A lot of communities have gone in this direction. Anybody in the state of Michigan cannot. There is actually a ban on regulating single-use items in the state of Michigan. And then increasing landfill and incineration fees. The state of Michigan has some of the lowest landfill costs. It's really cheap to landfill, which means it's hard to make money when you're trying to recycle or reuse or repair. Policy. So these are things like if you had a company or a school, they could adopt something like this. They could adopt a sustainable or impact purchasing policies. What this means is your school buys a lot of things and that has power and it takes money. And if your school said, well, we're only going to buy green things or things that meet the standard, that would be a sustainable purchasing policy. Could also utilize a reuse closet. Collaboration. We all know our world is really complex. It's very nuanced. There's 8 billion people on the planet. One of the most important things we need to do is collaborate. We need to work together to solve these really challenging problems and to make sure that everyone is brought along with it, with us. The Michigan Materials Marketplace is a place where companies can buy and sell goods. It's kind of like Facebook Marketplace, but for companies. Working with schools, which is what you all are doing, which is great, making sure young people are aware of the need for solutions. And then same thing with businesses. Do businesses know we need these kind of solutions? And Matt Naud is going to talk next about Next Cycle, and that's kind of where businesses come in. And then if you're so inclined, hold a repair cafe or a fix-it clinic. They have there's stuff online to make this easy to do. And the city of Ann Arbor recently wrote a paper, Envisioning a Circular Economy. And this is how Ann Arbor, our history in this sphere, and a look forward at where we could go in this sphere. So it's here, you're welcome to read it. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think I need to share screen. Sure thing. Jenny, would you mind putting the link to that to the paper in the chat?
Of course, I will do that.
And Matt, give me 1 second and I'll get you the screen sharing. All right, give it a try now, see if that works.
There we go. I think share sound, optimized for video clip. If this works right, you're going to get a video as well. Everybody seeing just one screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. So I live on the west side. I had a kid at Pioneer and a kid at Skyline. So big fan of Ann Arbor high schools. And when I was at the city of Ann Arbor, did a lot of work with Dave Siegel, the environmental education folks. So happy to be here. What I'm going to talk about is kind of, taking a lot of what Jenny's, gave us an overview on this idea of circular economy and sharing some of the practical things, real world things the state of Michigan is doing right now to try and build that here in Michigan. We've spent a lot of time teaching people how to be good recyclers, but haven't spent a lot of time on building the companies and jobs here in Michigan that use those recycled materials. Great to be here, and I'm going to kind of just move along, and you're going to get a video.
Did you know that recycling and recovery jobs could add $9 billion more of labor income into the state of Michigan? Next Cycle Michigan is creating pathways to help make that happen. We have an exciting opportunity for entrepreneurs, businesses, and organizations to get their recycling and recovery projects powered into action. Accepted teams receive technical support from industry experts to refine their concepts prior to the final pitch session. And that's where you come in. As a Next Cycle Michigan ambassador, you can help us recruit participants.
Whoops. Let me do that again.
Did you know that recycling and recovery jobs could add $9 billion more of labor income into the state of Michigan? Next Cycle Michigan is creating pathways to help make that happen. We have an exciting opportunity for entrepreneurs, businesses, and organizations to get their recycling and recovery projects powered into action. Accepted teams receive technical support from industry experts to refine their concepts prior to the final pitch session. And that's where you come in. As a Next Cycle Michigan ambassador, you can help us recruit participants, engage funders, and spread the word. Be a part of this unique effort to support local businesses, help the environment, and spark economic development in Michigan. Thank you for being a Next Cycle Michigan ambassador.
Thanks, folks. Sorry about that. So Next Cycle Michigan, this is an initiative by the state of Michigan, the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, or EGLE, so they put out a request for proposal for consulting support to help them. And the contract was won by a local firm called Resource Recycling Systems. They're based in Ann Arbor. They're recycle.com. So, they've been in the business for a long time if they own that URL. And we partnered with Centropolis Accelerator at Lawrence Tech. They're a business accelerator for companies that make stuff. So it's less about tech and more about manufacturing. And then Michigan Recycling Coalition is the nonprofit in Michigan that brings together the public sector and the private sector, all interested in moving, making Michigan's recycling program better. So as Jenny mentioned, we bury a huge amount of material in Michigan that could be recycled. And a lot of this is just supply and demand. We have a huge number of landfills, and it's made it very cheap to bury stuff in Michigan soil. It's not clear why Michigan wants to be a winner in that space, but of that material, we bury about 6.8 million tons of material that could be recycled. If we could pull out 2.7 million tons of that material, Michigan would reach a 45% diversion rate. And the EPA's now got a national goal, because this administration is paying attention, of 50% by 2030. So it's pretty close. But and currently Michigan's diversion rate's about 18%. I think Ann Arbor is closer to 40, and Jenny might be able to help with that number, but as a state, it's pretty abysmal. So kind of doing this right, getting us close to 45% starts to give us a respectable rate. San Francisco, places like that are at 70% diversion. So we still have a lot of room to grow. But I think the important thing that, we did an analysis for the state of Michigan showing if you took that 2.7 million tons and you, instead of burying it, you put it to its higher, better use. You sorted it correctly. You created a clean, quality, recyclable product. You kept organics out of landfills and made compost or used them in anaerobic digesters. You would add $9 billion to Michigan's labor economy alone, on over $30 million total. So there is a real economic opportunity, and it's why we need to be paying attention to this, in addition to a number of co-benefits that are out there. But those numbers, $30 billion in economic activity, bumps into what we think tourism does to Michigan's economy. So it's a big number. So next cycle's really focused on all of these 6 processes. You need good collection, you need a place to process it. Ann Arbor's rebuilding its MRF. The MRF is a material recovery facility, and Recycling Ann Arbor is going to rebuild that to the tune of about $7 million with good paying union jobs. Next cycle is about building the end markets. How do we then build the companies that once you've collected and sorted that material, how do we use it in Michigan, not ship it overseas to China, Indonesia, Malaysia, where it may or may not get recycled and it may get incinerated or just burned. You need a strong education program. Jenny was talking about supportive policies. And then the other piece that next cycle is focused on is leveraging public and private funding. We spend billions of dollars in Michigan managing waste, and it's not all spent well and not spent efficiently. So how do we align these sources of funding in ways that kind of meet our community goals? So again, with these end markets, and Jenny talked a little bit about this, but we're especially looking at some of these harder to recycle items. So I don't know if you've heard about fast fashion, that's fashion that's, the latest trend, and we're going to make and sell you this new thing and it's going to be cheap. Well, you buy that new thing and the old thing has to go somewhere, and it's either going in the garbage or you're giving it away to a reuse center, and it may or may not end up on the shop floor. So there's lots of new ideas about, do we start creating like big facilities that just sort textiles so we can either get it to a place that reuses it or get that material to a place where we can recycle that material into new materials to make new clothes. Thin film plastics, there are markets for that, but like right now, you can't put your Lay's potato chip bag in the Ann Arbor recycling program. It's just hard to collect and sort and get into a bin for resale. Organics, Ann Arbor's fortunate, we have a compost program. It's not year-round yet, but Jenny's going to work on that for us. But keeping that organic material out of the landfill, and we'll talk about, there's a huge carbon benefit associated with that, because that's the stuff that breaks down in an area without oxygen in landfills, and then it creates methane, which is, I think, 17 times worse than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. And then glass, we don't have a market for glass in Michigan. So Ann Arbor's glass, I think, is going to a facility in Ohio. Grand Rapids glass ends up going to Chicago. So we're talking with a company in Philly that takes crushed glass, heats it up, foams it into this aggregate that creates a building substrate they can use for roads and other materials. And so lots of new technologies that could be in place if we can make the economics right. So with that, we're kind of building 6 accelerator tracks. One in the upper left for food, liquids, and organics. The upper right is a small grant program, $5,000 to $10,000 grants for companies that a little money for a shredder or something to kind of help get their stuff into the right format so they can get it out to a market. Lower left, recycling, innovation, and technology. This program is built on 2 years of work we did in Colorado called Next Cycle Colorado. And so this is where, like, what are those way cool ideas that companies have to kind of take material and use it in a higher and better use? In Colorado, we had a company that was taking dying pines. There's a beetle that's killing a lot of pines out there. Taking that wood, trimming it, laminating it into these like heavy duty construction timbers, and also using hemp as hemp plastic for cannabis packaging. Colorado, Michigan, cannabis is legal. So there's a lot of interesting new twists there on what kind of packages you can use in that space. Innovation in the recycling supply chain, lots of opportunity. Jenny mentioned, recycling asphalt, but if we're going to spend $3 billion rebuilding Michigan's roads, lots of opportunity to look for opportunities to put recycled material into that. And then the upper middle intergovernmental initiatives, what's that track that looks to support innovation in the public sector and public-private partnerships? So where are those opportunities for 5 cities in and around Dearborn to create a super drop-off center for, a couple 100,000 people, especially a lot of poor people, people with limited access? Because one thing to remember for those that live in Ann Arbor is we're in a bubble. We've had curbside recycling here since 1978. There's a real expectation that people here, you go to Detroit, it's an opt-in program. You're not guaranteed recycling in your house. You go to rural Michigan and you want your trash picked up, you look in the phone book. It's just, that's not something the government does. So it's really different when you get out of the kind of urban areas and into more rural parts of Michigan. So you can go to nextcyclemichigan.com, and we've got a lot of data there trying to build maps on where are the end markets right now for things like glass, paper, metal. You'll see there's not glass in Michigan. We're trying to fix that. There's kind of 3 areas, buckets of money we're working with to try and create incentives in this space. So we're creating these accelerators. We've got corporate money and state money that we're bringing together so that teams that we accept into these tracks, there'll be money at the end to help support them. Also be Eagle state grant money available. We've got these micro grants. And then we've got this, we're calling it the Renew Partnership Portal, but we've got a lot of companies that are already working in this circular economy space. And they might need just a little bit of money to support their money. And so like, we've got a company that's rebuilding a MRF in Michigan, and they need $500,000 for an optical sorter to better sort cartons and polypropylene material. Well, it doesn't make economic sense for them to spend $500,000 on this piece of equipment just because it's so cheap to landfill. So we're bringing the polypropylene manufacturers, the people who make things out of polypropylene, and the state together to figure out a way to put those monies together to support the purchase of that optical sorter so we can get better recycling here in the state of Michigan. So I said next cycle's got this great economic benefit. I think it's got great equity potential as well. So if we're going to build new jobs, new businesses in Michigan, how do we do that in harder hit areas like Detroit, Flint, Benton Harbor, rural Michigan, places that really need jobs? And there's lots of opportunity to put harder to employ individuals back to work through some of these recycling and supply chain jobs. Climate potential. So Jenny talked about Ann Arbor's A20 plan. We calculate, and there's a EPA has something called the WARM model, and it's a cool Excel spreadsheet. You can download it and play around with it. But if you take all that material Jenny talked about between organics and other paper and plastics that we're burying and instead recycle it, we think we're going to be 7 million metric tons to the good in carbon. And to put that in perspective, Ann Arbor's carbon footprint and Grand Rapids, by the way, is 2 million metric tons each. So it's about 3.5 times a good size Michigan city's carbon footprint if we do this right. Also think there's a big energy potential. We're probably going to have to build about 30 of these material recovery facilities, recycling sorting centers, lots of machines, motors. I don't think we have a net zero MRF yet. So how do we build these with solar and other renewable energy opportunities to significantly reduce the carbon footprint of this processing side of this? So some of the examples that we're seeing, and Jenny talked again a little bit about this, anything that keeps something out of a Michigan landfill fits in next cycle. So Jenny talked about a repair center in an underserved community. How do we let people bring stuff to a place, fix it, rather than throwing it out, whether it's electronics, Jenny's furniture example. We've got 3 of the biggest office furniture manufacturers on the west side with Herman Miller, Steelcase, and Hayworth. They all have common shipping problems. The little widgets that they put on the corner of their furniture, and they want to make them out of more recycled material or compostable material. Got a small composter in Grand Rapids that wants to grow their business. Grand Rapids doesn't have a compost collection program the way Ann Arbor does, and so they're working under more of a private sector model. And this guy wants to go through our organics accelerator program to get some business advice to grow that program. 10 communities in Western Wayne County in and around Dearborn that if they all got together and aligned their contracts and aligned all that recycling and solid waste, they could be like Ann Arbor and build their own recovery facility and be more in control of their destiny. There was a community in near Detroit that had a private company picking up their recycling. But it wasn't in their contract that the recycling that was being picked up had to be recycled. So when the recycling market went upside down and it really became more expensive to recycle, the company told the city, yeah, we're just going to landfill all your recyclables because the contract doesn't say we're required to do it. So, lots of these problems all across the state that they bumped into, and again, Ann Arbor's been in this business a long time, and for the most part, you can trust that your material that you recycle here in Ann Arbor is actually being recycled. And I would argue a lot of that is because you've got a nonprofit managing this in addition to a city with staff and a sustainable budget to pay for this program. So we're less susceptible here to some of the market failures that other communities have been faced with. So real quick, these are some of our partners, Meyer, public sector, Kent County. They're building a 250-acre big sustainability park that they want to bring lots of companies where trash comes in and it gets reused and sorted by all these companies and very little goes to a landfill. If you go to our website, there's good stories. You want to learn about some of the kind of cool and interesting things going on in Michigan. we don't always do a good job telling the stories about the good work that's already happening. So feel free to go out there and you'll see Ann Arbor's there, but Northern Michigan has some great programs like Emmett County, probably one of the best rural composting and recycling programs in the state. So I'm going to wrap it up real quick. We want to build, let's say we want to build the end market for compost. So Ann Arbor's got a 29-acre compost site. I've got 2 big 96-gallon carts. I compost all winter, and that stuff gets picked up in April, and we make really good compost down there. But there's no incentive for me to get that compost and put it back on my lawn. So all the leaves and organic material that landed here and I collect and I send down there to do the right thing with. There's some models in other communities. So here's just some examples that Ann Arbor might consider. King County, Washington requires any new development to bring the organic content of the soil up to a certain level. So you're kind of building good soil every time there's a new development. So this is an idea that's out there. We also have a stormwater utility where we charge residents, businesses, and homeowners based on the amount of hard surface on your property. And it's a way that we kind of manage all the pipes and the green and gray infrastructure we have. Well, if you put compost on your lawn, not only when the rain falls, that compost will hold the water and keep it from running off your lawn into the drain. But it also, it's got critters and other bacteria that when that water is in there, the water that gets slowed down and eventually comes off the property is cleaner water. So we get a stormwater quality benefit and a quantity benefit. I think there's an opportunity that Ann Arbor could create a credit for homeowners that if you put a cubic yard of compost on your lawn, you could get credit for that. The other thing, and Jenny was talking about compost maybe needing to be higher up on the scale. They're finding in California, if you take compost and you put it on rangeland, not only does it make the soil better, but there's more carbon sequestration. So that compost and rangeland is actually pulling carbon out of the atmosphere and storing it in the soil. And so there's a real question about, is there an urban model that works the same way? That if you put compost down on city yards, can we pull more carbon out of the atmosphere? So with that, I'm gonna, Jenny talked about a few of these things. What can you do? It's really important to know what's recyclable and compostable. So when you are doing recycling and are doing composting, you're not making it worse for the people that are sorting. So you're only putting the right stuff in there and not putting the stuff that you wish was going to be recycled. Compost as much food scraps at school and at home as you can. I should have put it in here, but I actually weighed my little espresso cups, and it's a huge amount of wet organic material that's going to a landfill that I keep out and compost. Work with your schools. Schools aren't required to recycle and compost the way businesses and residents are. Ann Arbor requires you to sort your recyclables out of your waste as a resident in your home. Try not to buy things that aren't recyclable or compostable. And then I think it's important that we start telling our schools and our stores and our restaurants. I go to a Thai restaurant and they serve me takeout in styrofoam containers, and I really don't have an easy way to deal with that. And I would easily pay more if they gave me plastic that I could recycle or compostable. So I think it's important that you let the people, the places you do business, know that this is your preference. I'm not a big fan of shaming, but I do think, this is where social media and the brands really respond to, hey, so-and-so brand, why isn't this t-shirt made of more recycled content cotton or things like that? So Anyway, those are my thoughts, and I'm just a couple slides. If you worst case, go to the website. This is on Jenny's website about these are things that can go in your compost bin. These are things that go in your recycling bin. And with that, happy to answer any questions and so glad to be